welcome to this session. We're going to be looking at climate change and security, testing multilateralism. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome two very qualified women who are going to address this topic with me. Please, a very warm welcome to the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations and the Chair of the UN Sustainable Development Group, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. Delighted to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you.
And we're also delighted to welcome the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the United Arab Emirates to the United Nations, Lana Nusseibeh. Thank you so much, Lana.
Pleasure to be here, Eithne.
So we have quite a lot to get through in the next few minutes, but I do know you are the two key qualified people who can really address these issues. And Madam DSG, if I may start with you, when we look at the situation, you're bound really by what, 193 countries, but also you're really accountable to more than 7.8 billion people in the world who are all infected by and somewhat maybe scared by climate change. You know, there's a lot to take into consideration here, a lot of viewpoints, a lot of different issues. No two countries are created equally, but we really have to look at how we, I suppose, get the direction that we need. How can you get some consensus to actually begin to move in that direction?
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's, to have, first of all, an understanding that this affects everyone and that people are not just statistics or numbers, and it's in our home, and that there is an urgency about it. It is happening now. It is affecting millions of people already. And we have frameworks, we have the tools with which to do this. We have the resources with which to make the changes that are necessary. And what we really need to do is to dig deep with the political will that is needed from leaders who have to understand the responsibility that they have for people, for the planet, and for the direction in which things are going now, which are not good. So to get the consensus around this is to continue to convene and to speak and to demonstrate the implications of inaction. Inaction on economies, inaction in people's lives, even as we see the pandemic itself that is also exacerbating the climate change challenge that we have. So it is about people, it is about leaders, it is about the space that we convene with a sense of urgency to continue pushing the implications for inaction.
Without a doubt, and I think we're beginning to hear that from everybody. It really is, that urgency now, and as you say too, the urgency and the action that's needed, we have to put them together. Ambassador Nusseibeh, if I can bring you in here. The UAE has begun the year with some other countries, of course, on the Security Council, the UN's highest decision-making body. And of course, there's a busy couple of years ahead, but a lot of priorities I'm sure you have in place. And when it comes to climate change, perhaps you might share a few of those with us. What are the key issues that you're looking at?
Thank you, Eithne. Really, it's a pleasure to be here with the Deputy Secretary General, Amina, a good friend, and to bring this important and complex conversation into Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week as well. And as you've noted out, climate security is a priority for the UAE as we've taken our seat on the Security Council, and it's a relatively new area for the UN. And it's true that at this particular moment, given recent events, the Security Council may not be ready to make a grand statement, as it were, about climate as a universal security threat. But I think the UAE hopes to play the role of building consensus, continuing to raise the issue. And there is already consensus that climate is already a major problem in many situations. So I think there is consensus around that in the UN Security Council. You asked about other priorities. Women, peace and security will be a priority for us. Countering terrorism and extremism will be a priority for us. And of course, bringing innovation and technology and doing things different the way we do in the United Arab Emirates will definitely be a priority for us. So in terms of the topic of climate, I think today very few people question, for example, that a drought can add fuel to the fire of a conflict, or the water contamination from sea level rise can contribute to existing tensions over water supplies. And so I think those are the kinds of topics we're going to try to be raising in our discussions. And of course, the unfortunate fact is that many governments and Security Council members today have direct experience of climate change worsening security situations. So we've really, as a council and as the UN system, moved to formally recognizing the climate threat in one way or another. And I think we'll start seeing more of that discussion evolve during both council topics, but also in the other houses of the UN system.
And Deputy Secretary General, when we look at, both of you have talked about the urgency that's needed without a doubt here. I mean, I think we're on the road, to 1.5, that 1.5 world that we really need. But again, this has to be done in a just way. It has to leave nobody behind. And, that's a big challenge. How do you actually get everybody to realize that and make sure that that, as well as, the good intentions, is very much part of everybody's agenda?
Well, first, I think to be very clear, 1.5 degrees is on life support. It's not guaranteed, and the actions we need to take are now. Many of these actions, climate actions, can be taken within the context and framing of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's what we can pull in terms of the just transitions that we are asking for. So mitigation in itself has to happen. We have to phase out coal. And in doing so, we open up the pathway for economies to grow green. And in growing green, looking at the energy mix that we have to have in bringing in green technologies and green jobs. So do them together. Make sure that women are benefiting from it. And that the economy itself benefits from going that way. We know who the countries are that we need to target in trying to get them to phase out the coal and reduce their emissions. They're all in the G20. But we have over 180 other countries who have to take that pathway to climate action and the 1.5 degrees. So again, investing in energy, in connectivity, in food systems, making sure that jobs are at the center of it and that those in leaving no one behind. Each country will have its pathway, and this is where the United Nations comes in with its framework, with its footprint on the ground to try to help countries accompany many of those transitions. Lana spoke to the security climate agenda. There is consensus. It's happening on the ground as we see it. I can speak about my country, Nigeria, and the northeast, where the Lake Chad has dried up to less than 10% of what it has, and there an insurgency of terrorism, Boko Haram. And who suffers? Women, children, young people. But today there are efforts to invest in energy, to invest in restoration, to make the alternative to peace and security, but also the climate actions that are very readily available, and the investments are there. So it's connecting the two together.
Now, Ambassador, when we look at the Security Council, I mean, we've seen a major split there. The BRICS, for the most part, they don't particularly want the Council to take action on climate, while Western countries, smaller developing countries, of course, really, really do. So how do we navigate this space, Ambassador Lana, making sure that the UN can protect fragile communities, and again, from tipping particularly into conflict and violence, which you've touched on briefly?
Well, look, I think that the Council's already formally recognized the climate threat in a growing number of regions like the Horn of Africa, the Middle East, and the Sahel. You're hearing this all the time in the statement. So that's the first thing. I think there's much more coherence around the issue than is visible to the public eye. But of course, when it comes to things like resolutions and adopting language, things become much more geopolitically tense in the Council dynamic. And I think what we have to do as Council members that are pragmatic is focus our efforts on enabling both consensus and progress. And I think that's really very much what we're trying to do on this issue, building on the work that was done before. So, for example, as a top priority, and where are the other spaces, as Amina mentioned, that we can be looking at to look at the root causes as much as anything else. So as a top priority, we'd like to see multilateral climate aid from the World Bank, UNDP, and other institutions be much more focused on these extremely fragile states. That's a step we can take now. Aid should also take more intentional account of its security value. So right now, 80 times more climate finance goes to non-fragile countries than to extremely fragile countries. But we already know that climate impacts in fragile situations are going to lead to more conflict. So that low level of support doesn't make sense when you think about the staggering consequences and costs of conflict and instability. So investments in things like solar-powered irrigation, drought-resistant seeds. These are all critical for a fragile community's development, but they're also low-cost security interventions with tremendous returns. So I think if more council members could start seeing it in that prism, through that prism, I think we would start moving the dial a lot more. So, and as Amina also said, and I want to pick up on that, these investments need to be explicitly designed to target women and youth and to give them meaningful roles in decision-making, because there's ample evidence that both climate and security outcomes are better when they follow those ideas and needs of all members of society. Again, that's a shift that we can take and that we'd like to facilitate on the Security Council, but also as president of COP28. So directing this new and sometimes politically charged concept towards tangible investment opportunities that really makes sense to everyone. And I'm sure the DSG has said this many times herself. They might be controversial, but we believe this is the direction of travel that we all need today. Really pragmatic solutions on food, on water, on energy, and enhanced financing for them.
And indeed, for the benefit of everybody. Just very, very quickly, and I need a sort of 30-second answer from both of you if I could. I'll start with Madam DSG. Looking ahead to COP27 in Egypt, you know, what do you want to see that will really show multilateralism is working?
Well, very quickly, first of all, it's the Africa COP, and it will happen in Egypt. What we want to take is the homework we gave ourselves in Glasgow, into Egypt, into Sharm el-Sheikh, where we address mitigation and making sure that we bring down the end of coal, where adaptation finance is increased to 50% in all our multilateral development banks, and that we are really addressing adaptation where it's needed most in the most vulnerable of countries, in our small island and developing states. And then also to look at loss and damage and the financial architecture that is needed to promote the investments for climate action.
To you.
So very excited about Egypt's COP, and I think our COP, our global COP, and their focus on political and financing commitments to adaptation, I agree, is exactly right and already a really positive sign. And of course, coping with climate change is really a pressing need for billions of people, especially in developing countries, which I think Egypt will address during their presidency. And of course, it's definitely a burden, I think, more and more in the post-pandemic environment. This is becoming evident. It's beyond the capacity of most individual nations today. And so that's where the UN has to come in with a plan. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be resolved at the speed we'd all like, or indeed the speed that the issue deserves. But one of the sort of greatest and least heralded strengths of the UN is this capacity for small group diplomacy. And I think diverse countries hashing out these issues in late night sessions in a basement room supported by the stellar secretariat under Amina's leadership will find these toeholds for compromise that I think will lead up to the UAE's COP the following year, and that we're going to be very ambitious about as well. And it's a reason to keep investing in the multilateral system.
Indeed, a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities there, and I, firmly believe it's in the right hands there. So I wish you both the very best of luck, and everybody really behind all of the great work you have to do. Thank you so much, Ambassador Lana Nusseibeh. Delighted to have you here, and the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. So great to have time with both of you. Thank you again.